Welcome to our brand new course on how to work with MySQL. In this first instructional video, we are going to learn how to install and set up a brand new computer with MySQL and install Workbench along with the MySQL Database product and also work with our command line. So what we're going to do is we're going to navigate to mysql.com and we're going to go over to the download section. And from the download section, what we're going to look for, we're going to scroll down towards the bottom and we're going to go to MySQL Community Downloads. Now on this page, as long as you're working with a Windows computer, and that's what this instructional video is going to demonstrate, we're going to look for the MySQL installer for Windows. And we're going to take the latest currently general available edition, which is 8.0.35, and we're going to download the installer that's self-contained. And the download's a little bit bigger, but actually it'll install faster. So the size is not a concern with our high-speed connections these days. So click download. Now on this page, they're going to want to get you to sign up or log in if you have an Oracle account, but you do not have to. So we can skip over the login and the sign up and we can click no thanks, just start my download. And again, not a large size, it'll download pretty quickly in your browser. And we'll give that a few seconds. Once it's done, just click open file. It'll launch our installer. You'll see that we're preparing to install. And I'm on a brand new Windows installation. I just created this Azure VM just a little while ago. So it's a clean computer, so it's going to do some prerequisites during the install process that you may or may not get. And we'll call attention to that while we go through the process. The nice thing about this installation is it's all self-contained. It installs our MySQL database along with our Workbench, which is our GUI environment tool. So what we can choose here is the full installation, and it'll tell you it's got the shell, so our command prompt, our Workbench, it's got our server, it also has documentation and samples. We'll click next here on the full installation. This is where I was mentioning if you have a new environment and you don't have these prerequisites, it's going to check for them. And if they're not there, you'll see that they have not been satisfied. So you can click no to continue. You'll click execute here and it will install all of the prerequisites necessary. And you're going to get a license agreement from Microsoft for Visual C++ to install. And you'll want to do that before proceeding to the next screen because you're going to want those prerequisites in place. Click next. Now you're ready to install all of the components, so we can just click execute. And you'll see it moves pretty quickly through the installation process. The server is already installed. Workbench is progressing very quickly. And now complete. We have the shell installing next. It always fascinates me sometimes how the progress bars go very quickly and then they'll slow down at certain aspects of the installation. I think in many cases they are still a facade and are not an accurate representation of an installation process. The Workbench was interesting. We got all the way to 99% and then all of a sudden it came to a halt. The shell, which I would expect to be smaller and less in size than the workbench, is actually progressing much slower, which is pretty astonishing. And there we go. Went from 76% to complete. The router is moving very quickly. The documentation I'd expect to move as quickly. And the samples the same way. Okay, so everything's been installed. We have the status being complete, which is good. Show details. If you're not as lucky and you have any problems, always review your log. Hopefully the log can give you some insight. If you see any issues or problems, that's where you head off to Google and Stack Overflow and see if you can troubleshoot the problems you might have run into. But if all is clean, just click Next. Now we're ready to configure our product, and we're going to go one by one through configuration. Okay, so I'm going to click Next. Now here for type and networking, we're going to keep all the defaults. Again, this is just a demo instructional environment, so I'm currently comfortable and safe with keeping everything default. In a real world productional environment, I may make changes here for security purposes and all, but the port is one thing to note. For those of you that like to memorize ports, it's always good to know what ports your products and technologies run under. So MySQL, if you're ever tested on it, 3306 is the port that's most common to run MySQL under. We can click Next, keeping all the defaults. Authentication method, they've increased security, which is great. We're going to keep the recommendation, the stronger SHA-256 base password. We would never really want to go to a lower security model unless you were running something of an older version of the MySQL platform. In this case, again, this being clean, we want the latest. Click Next. Here, be very, very cautious to make note of what you do for your root password, okay? Make sure it's strong and make sure you write it down or keep it safe so that you do not forget it. If you do, it becomes very painful to actually get it recovered. This will be the password that you will administrate your MySQL environment with. Okay, so you want to see it strong. You want to make sure that it's confirmed, obviously, in both boxes. You can also add users now. If you want additional users, I typically, again, being only in my instructional environment and demo environment, work under my root account. But again, in your real world environment, you don't want to operate under just the system admin. You only want to use that when you absolutely must need to use it. So I'd recommend adding users here. Again, if you're just doing this for instructional purposes and training purposes, you're perfectly okay not to add any users. So click Next. Again, notice the defaults for the Windows service. When your computer starts, it's going to start MySQL unless you tell it not to. This is one of those things where if you have the computing power and you just want to be able to go into MySQL either through the shell or through Workbench and be able to connect right away without having to worry about going into your Windows services and starting it, leaving the defaults are good. So we'll click Next here. Again here, permission-wise, this being just an Azure VM and the only thing that's going to run on this, I'm going to leave full grant. You can review the options here. Again, from a perspective of just an educational purposes, full access is perfectly safe. At this point, we're ready to execute the configuration. This will take a couple minutes. We'll click Execute. And again, we're looking for green check marks everywhere. When we do the initialization of the databases, this will take a moment or two to actually complete this process, and then the rest should move pretty quickly to start the server. Once this is done, we're going to look at the log. We want to make sure, again, that's clean. As long as we have green check marks, we'd expect that to be the case. And all looks good and was successful. We can check the log. If you were not successful, you'll see some issues here. Again, if you're not on a new computer, chances are your reasons for failure are going to be because of port conflicts. That typically tends to be the #1 reason. We're ready to go on to the router. Click Next. Here, I'm just going to go with the default settings. You can review those and all, but we're just going to click finish. And then for samples and examples, click next. Here is where you want to use your root password. So again, hopefully you remembered what you chose or wrote it down. Otherwise, you will not be able to access your MySQL. So you'll type in your password. You're going to click check, make sure it verifies correctly, connection succeeds. Click next. We're going to click execute. What this will do, it'll run some installation with sample databases and all. All is good. We have check marks. Again, a log should there be any failures. And click finish. Everything's been configured at this point. You see configuration is complete. And we'll click next. Here is our final screen that proves our installation is complete. We're going to start our workbench and we're going to start our shell and we'll see that everything installed properly. Our shell will start first, most likely, because that is a little bit lightweight. And you'll see that our command prompt has MySQL there. Okay. And you'll see here Workbench is up and we have a local instance for my connections already configured. We'll work with Workbench just for verification real quick before we wrap this tutorial up. I will click on the local instance. I will put my password in one more time. We can save that in the vault. Again, only if it's your own development environment. I'd recommend this from a training perspective. Again, in real world, not a good idea to save your passwords in a vault like this. This doesn't ensure that you're never going to lose it. Again, make sure you know what it is. Click OK. And now we are successfully connected to our database in MySQL. We can check our server status and we can review some other aspects of it. But we should see that we are running and connected. All right. And that concludes our installation tutorial for MySQL and the database and Workbench. In our upcoming instructional videos, we will learn how to start creating our own database and to work with databases. Down in the comments, you will find a link to a document, a PDF document that will go over all of the installation instructions should you want to review that and not have to pause this video during the installation. Please subscribe to my channel, share this with others if you found it helpful. Put comments below if you have any questions or need any assistance, and I hope you find this valuable. Thank you.